Good evening, everyone. I'm Brent Toderian, and when I think of urban resilience, I think of this question. What if we designed our cities for people and not just for cars? Please don't applaud, you're using up some of my 7 minutes. Way back in 1955, Lewis Mumford, one of the greatest urban thinkers ever, said this: adding more traffic lanes to address congestion is like loosening your belt to address obesity. I can tell by the laughter you get the point. This is what we now call induced traffic, or the law of congestion. The idea that when you build more roads or more lanes for cars, they just fill up, and they fill up relatively fast. And we know that no successful city has ever solved traffic congestion by building more roads and lanes, and yet we keep trying and keep failing. Indeed, traffic models have largely ignored the law of congestion for decades until relatively recently, so continuously justifying new road projects, until what I call the democratization of this knowledge around the law of congestion thanks to Twitter and social media and the mainstream media, where all sorts of mainstream operations are now writing this concept that when you build more roads, it actually makes traffic worse. It's now a ubiquitous knowledge that is being used to challenge the sort of great and powerful laws perspective of traffic engineers. And it's not just social media, or mainstream media or social media, it's also pop culture. This is a Flash comic book. You know The Flash, the fastest man alive? Well, the Flash in his secret identity is talking with a scientist, and they're discussing whether or not to expand a highway or to fund public transit. And the scientist says to the Flash, building more highways doesn't reduce traffic. It does the opposite. It increases the volume of motorists and generates even more traffic. This is a Flash comic book, ladies and gentlemen. And he goes on to explain that cities are actually tearing down their freeways, and not only are the cities getting better, but the traffic is getting better. And just as this conversation is getting really good, the bad guys crash in through the skylight, and the Flash has to change costumes and save the day. And it's really a shame the conversation didn't continue, because this is a fantastic conversation. And I'm pretty convinced the people who crashed through the skylight are in some way connected to the highway building industry. But it was too late. The word has gotten out. City after city, well over 100 cities, have torn down their urban freeways and actually not only improved their cities, but improved traffic. David, I won't mention Toronto and the Gardner East. Oh, I guess I just did. But not just tearing down big infrastructure, big car sewers like freeways, but doing road diets and converting streets to complete streets and shared streets and pedestrian streets, all sorts of ways of reconsidering this traffic infrastructure from infrastructure for cars to infrastructure for people moving and people being. And in many cases inspired by Vancouver, my city. This is where the freeways were supposed to go. Many of you probably heard that Vancouver is one of the only major cities that never built any freeways. This is where the freeways were planned to go. They would have lobotomized our waterfront like freeways did so many different cities, and devastated Stanley Park and cut through a number of low-income communities. And thankfully the public, and it was the public first, and then the politicians and the planners, wised up and realized this was not a good path for the city and its future. And that led to the Vancouver model of city making and Vancouverism, all of these terms to describe the amount of attention we get in Vancouver for our city making, all started with this rejection of the idea that building for the car was a good idea. Many cities, though, didn't get wise, and many did build the freeways. This is literally where I just came from, Oslo, Norway. We think European cities are smarter. No, they learned our bad habits. Oslo built this motorway, this car sewer, separating the fjord from the center city, and then they got smart and realized they wanted to reconnect, so at remarkable cost, they tore it down. And they started to build an urban waterfront neighborhood with housing, a new downtown public library, a youth center, and a multimodal boulevard that has trams and buses and bike lanes and plenty of room for pedestrians that actually moves more people than the old freeway did, but does so in a delightful way. When Vancouver said no to the freeways, we had to reconsider the concept of mobility. And we moved away from this new trend of balancing modes. I bet the Saskatoon plan speaks to balancing modes of transportation. I call that code for the status quo, but slightly better. Balance is not really the right idea. It's prioritization that will do the job. Vancouver, its official policy says walking first, then biking, then public transit, then goods movement, and then the car. We don't ban the car, we just prioritize it last. And here's the point. That's better for everyone, including drivers. This is not an anti-car message, an anti-driver message. It actually works better for everyone. A point I made when I took the CBC National crew about 6 months ago to Medellin, Colombia, where I was working. And we talked about when you design a city for cars, it works better for everyone, including drivers. And when you design a city, I have to clarify that. When you design a city for cars, it fails for everyone, including drivers. When you design a city for people, a multimodal city, it works better for everyone, including drivers. So this isn't an anti-driver argument. It's a pro-city, a pro-choice, a pro-success kind of argument. And it really starts with the realization that this is largely about space. It takes an incredible amount of space to move everyone around by cars and park them if everyone wants to drive. If everyone's driving, nobody's moving. We're stuck in traffic, we're stuck behind the wheel, because it takes an incredible amount of space and an incredible amount of public cost to facilitate everyone moving by car. Luckily, cities have wised up, and we're having quite clever and whimsical ways to make the point that it takes less space to move people by walking, biking, and transit. And hopefully this is one of those pictures worth 1,000 words types of scenarios. It isn't just about traffic infrastructure. It's about how we design and plan our cities. We say that the best transportation plan is a great land use plan. It's how you create more compact, mixed, walkable communities that create what I call the power of nearness. Everything is close, and you don't have to take so many trips and so many long trips to get everything, because so many things are close by. And we have to design our city around that concept, the power of nearness. And when we do, we realize that we've got opportunities to rethink our streets, not just as traffic sewers to get through as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, as our traffic engineers like to focus on, to what I call sticky streets, the idea that a great street actually slows you down, encourages you to enjoy and linger and love your citizens, your fellow citizens and your street. And it's about how long you stay rather than how fast you move through a street. And when you start to design this kind of city, you get the kind of serendipitous opportunities for happiness and pleasure. And someone said you can measure a great street by the number of kisses that happen on the street. Now, I don't want to sound warm and fuzzy. This is about success. This is about streets that attract economic talent and creativity, and is successful in just about every way you can measure, and in an awful lot of ways that you can't, what I call a city of smiles. Now here's the real challenge. We're building cities, but we're building far more suburbs than cities. Far more people live there, and still far more people are moving there. And really the success and failure of our cities and regions will depend on how well we do our suburbs. We can do the inner city almost perfectly and still fail. And our suburbs are essentially auto-dominated. It really is the only rational choice in how you get around. And that's not by coincidence or unavoidable. It's based on the way we've been designing our suburbs. And suburbs aren't going away, but we have to be able to design them a lot smarter. And that's probably the #1 challenge of our next generation of city making. But at some point in this talk, most of you are probably thinking what I call the 8 most unhelpful words in the English language. We can never do that in our city. It's amazing how much energy goes into excuse. But I'm here to tell you that in my experience working across Canada and around the world, the difference between bold and creative cities and cities that are struggling is not their size or their climate or any of these kind of details. It's their vision and their will, their willingness to do what's necessary to actually make change. And I'll end by maybe giving you a little inspiration. This is the city of Paris. That just this week the mayor closed down the entire city, not just a few streets, but the entire city to cars, and opened it up to people, and transformed not only the city, but the mindset of Parisians when it comes to what is possible in a city for people. And so I say to you, the Paris of the prairies, This is what the real Paris is doing. It's your move. Thank you very much.